Hello, Hare Krishna. Namaste.
Namaste, Hare Krishna.
Hello, how are you?
All good.
All good. Actually, we just did our meeting, group 2 meeting, and I will update that on the group sometime later once we are done with this class.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for providing this opportunity.
Yeah. Your happiness and smile says it all, Mataji.
Thank you.
Actually, we introduced ourselves. We had a wonderful introduction, and we planned something for the upcoming
Yeah, upcoming assignment.
for the May 1st. How are we going to present? So, thank you so much again, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, blessing my beloved senses.
Hare Krishna. It's 7:01 and Bhayahari Prabhuji will be here in a second if he's not already. I see we are almost 50 devotees on the call. Just checking if Bhayahari Prabhuji has joined the class. So there are 62 devotees.
Prabhuji is here, Prabhu.
Sorry, Prabhu.
Prabhuji joined.
Oh, Prabhuji joined. Okay. Hare Krishna, Bhayahari Prabhuji.
Haribol, can you hear me?
Yes, Bhayahari Prabhuji, we can hear you. Dandavat Pranam, please accept our humble obeisances. All goes to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, please accept my hands close to Prabhupada. Thank you so much for for joining. Just a few housekeeping items. So I know it took us a little longer to prepare the groups. So we moved our group presentation for next week. So we'll do the session a little differently. I have a presentation that I will share with you, followed by Q&A on the introduction lecture that was recorded and anything else that you may have in reading the introduction. And the Q&A, as I mentioned, would basically be both from the participants to me and me to the participants. Okay, so without further ado, we'll start. Om Agyantamanandasya Gyananjana Shalakya Chakshurunmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Svadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Udapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagunaragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Sri Vishakha Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishbhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Okay, so let me share the presentation. So this is intended to be further summation on Srila Prabhupada's wonderful introduction. Right, he talks about many points. Some of them I called out in the previous lecture, and some of them I'll be calling out this time. So what Prabhupada tries to do over here is to kind of establish a foundation for the basic concepts of spirituality. And like I said, it goes beyond Bhagavad Gita. It's spirituality as a whole. And his idea is to establish a common lexicon, because he does not explain these terms in details later on. He just uses them. So his assumption is that the reader knows it. His assumption is that the introduction has been read, so the reader is familiar with the terms. So the first notion is that of who is God, right? So some of the points that are unequivocally made is that there is only one God. He's a person, right? So the notion of the God being a concept, or the God being one's personal projections of transcendence, or God being in a form of energy, or the God being as is said by the communists, that the crutch of the weak and the opiate of the masses. So all those notions are disambiguated. Prabhupada clearly says that he is a person, and not difficult for us to relate to, because all our experience has been relating to persons, to ourselves as a person, and to the others around us, right? So he's a person. He has a form. It's kind of built into the notion of being a person, and he has many names. We worship as Krishna. right? And along with the names, I would also add that he has many forms. However, we pin our object of worship on Krishna in this particular form. Where do we get this from? Right? It's not an artist's imagination. It's not a philosopher's projection. This is based on the scriptures. The scriptures gives us detailed description of the Lord, and based on these descriptions, there is an understanding of the form. Right? His body is the color of monsoon cloud, two-armed form, has a peacock feather. He carries a flute. He's exquisitely beautiful. Right now, does Krishna actually look like this? Who knows? Radha Govind Maharaj makes this point that the beauty of the Lord is beyond our conception, because our conception is limited by our material framework, and the Lord is infinitely more beautiful. But we worship him with this name and this form. So along with the name and form are qualities. Like so when it is said that Krishna is nirgun, sometimes it is interpreted as without qualities, right? But the understanding is that he is without material qualities. He has three essential qualities: Sat, Chit, and Anand. Sat means eternal. There was never a time when he did not exist, and there will never be a time where he will cease to exist. Right? So he's eternal. Chit means that he's fully conscious. He's sentient. Right? He's universally conscious. And Anand means that he is supremely blissful. So he's not in a mode of neutrality. He's not in a mode of nothingness. Right? So again, this is at least this notion we can relate to, maybe in a limited way, because we are also Sat, Chit, Anand. We may not be eternal, but we exist. Right? Chit means we may not have universal consciousness, we have limited consciousness. And Anand means that we are at least Anandamai, that we are pleasure seeking. We may not be always seeking getting the pleasure, but certainly we are looking for that pleasure. And then he has unlimited pastimes, leelas, right? So Krishna is not existing in a vacuum. And he's not by himself, sitting somewhere all by himself. Right? He's surrounded by his devotees. He's surrounded by his paraphernalia, and he's enjoying unlimited pastimes, Leela. Right? Krishna is Leelamai there. So now let's look at some of the things that that may be placed to us as challenges. Right? One of the question may be only one God. So we are making this notion of only one God. Somebody might say, Ramakrishna Prabhu. Okay, so I was just going to say, it's a little distracting. You're moving your camera around there. If you can settle down, that would help everybody, especially me. Thank you. So the notion of only one God may be challenged. What about Lord Vishnu, right? What about Lord Ram? What about Narsingadev? What about Lord Kapila? Right? So how can we say that there is only one God? What about Narayan Rishi? So the understanding that we have is that Vaishnavism promotes monotheism but polymorphism. Monotheistic means one God. Polymorphic means many forms. So there may be several forms of the Lord. The same Lord may appear as Lord Vishnu, as Lord Ram, as Narsingadev, as Lord Kapila, as Narayan Rishi, and millions of other incarnations, but one God only, right? So just because when we go to work, we dress up in a formal attire. When we are at home, we are in an informal attire. Maybe when we go swimming, we are in a different attire. When we go hiking, we are in a different attire. It does not mean that there are many of us. So similarly, in the Bhagavatam, it is said that the Lord has unlimited incarnations. Actually, the analogy that is used is that just like there are countless waves in the ocean, the Lord is unlimited incarnations. Right? Etechayamsa kalapumsha, many Krishnas tu Bhagavan Swayam. Underlying, there is only Krishna. So we should not be confused by seeing the Lord in different worshipable forms. The Lord appears in all these forms in response to the desire of his devotees. The Lord appears in all these forms in order to perform various leelas. He may sometimes appear as a tortoise, sometimes he may appear as a fish. All of these are in response to the desires of the devotees. All of this is to perform leelas. It does not impinge on the notion of monotheism. And so from our end, we need to have this understanding clear. Now, a very close question to that is, who are we? So we've kind of established the position of Krishna, right? Krishna is a person, he has a form, he has qualities, he has pastimes, and he may appear in many forms, but Krishna is Krishna. So what about us? Right? So for one thing, we are not God, right? So that part we have to be clear. The basic definition is that we should not commingle our existence with that of the Lord, right? And this may seem apparent, but you would be surprised to actually see that the number of people who subscribe to this notion of personal divinity, that they are God, is very, very high. And so Prabhupada makes this point right up front, that not God. But we have qualities like God. Right? So Krishna is eternal, we are eternal. Krishna is fully conscious, we are also conscious. Maybe our scope of consciousness is limited, but we are also chit. Krishna is pleasure-seeking, we are also pleasure-seeking. There's no jiva who gets up in the morning and says that, let me try and be as miserable as possible. The natural desire of all the living entities is to be anandamaya, to be pleasure-seeking. And Prabhupada gives this different analogies of a drop of water and the ocean. The chemical composition would be the same, but obviously an ocean is an ocean and a drop is a drop, or a spark and a fire. So different analogies he would give. So if we have qualities like God, what is it that makes us not God? The fact that we are infinitesimal and the Lord is infinite. Right? The fact is that we are fallible, which means that we are prone to fall downs. The jiva is fallible. That is why we are over here, right? In the material world, because there is a fall down. So as jivas, we are prone to fall downs. So a spark of the fire may be easily overwhelmed, but not the fire itself. Like a drop of ocean may be held in the palm of a hand, but not the ocean. So because Krishna is infinite, he is also infallible. Krishna can never fall. Krishna can never be covered. And we can be. So that's the difference. Because of which the jiva may exist in a liberated or a conditioned state. Right? Because we are fallible, we may fall down and become conditioned, or we may not fall down and we may be in a liberated state. For Krishna, there is no duality. He is always in a liberated state. Even when Krishna comes in the material world, he is in a liberated state. Right? That's the difference between us and Krishna. And we have unlimited desires. Right? So that is one way, that is one place where we are similar to Krishna. Krishna has unlimited desires, we have unlimited desires. The difference is that Krishna can fulfill all his desires. We depend on Krishna to fulfill our desires. Nityas nityanams chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidatate kame. So Nityas nityanams, of all the eternals, there is one eternal. Chetanas chetananam. Of all the sentients, there is one sentience. What is the difference between the one and the alls? Eko bahunam yo vidate kaman. That one is fulfilling the desires of everyone else. That one is Krishna, the everyone else is us. So who are we? We are unlimited in number, but eternally unique. Right? So we said Krishna is one, but we are unlimited. But each one of us is unique. So even though there are so it's like it said that there are unlimited snowflakes. So if you look at the snowflake under the microscope, each snowflake looks different from the others in terms of its formation of a hexagon, whatever it is. Each one of them is unique. Right? So they're unlimited, but every one of them is unique. Same thing with the jivas. Unlimited, but each one of us is unique. We are the jiva. Right? In one of the scriptures, the jiva is introduced as the famous jiva. So we are the famous jivas. So putting it together, at one end we have Krishna with all his incarnations, and they are known as the Vishnu Tattva. At the other hand, we have the innumerable jivas, right? They are known as the Jiva Tattva. And the two can never mix. So Krishna will never become a jiva. Even if Krishna comes looking like a jiva, even if he comes appearing to take birth, if he comes looking to appearing to grow old, appearing to die, appearing to bleed, whatever, Krishna is always Vishnu Tattva. He will never become a jiva. And the jiva will never become a Vishnu Tattva. Even though that jiva may be powerful as Brahma, who can create entire universes, the jiva may be full of mystic opulences, that just by their thoughts, they can create planets. You know, Vishwamitra by the recitation of mantras, he was creating entire planets. So regardless of how godlike they are, the jiva will never be a Vishnu Tattva. Before death, after death, before being liberated, while conditioned, regardless of any situation, the Jiva Tattva will always remain a Jiva Tattva, and the Vishnu Tattva will always be Vishnu Tattva. This is one of the core foundation of Vaishnava theology that we need to internalize. So also want to talk about a concept that Srila Prabhupada uses in Bhagavad Gita. He kind of explains, but he never takes us he never explains formally. I think he leaves for us to deduce the explanation. Mayavadis, right? In Bhagavad Gita, in the purpose, Krishna will often say, unlike the Mayavadis, etc., 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 or the Mayavadis do this, etc., etc., etc. So let's take a step back and understand who this Mayavadis are. So they subscribe to the notion that God is without form, that God is impersonal, right? So then the question comes that what about all the personal forms there? So they say no, God is cannot be limited by a form. That if you put a form on something, you are limiting that existence. So when the form is, so let's say the form is sitting in Washington, DC, then that form cannot be in Chicago or New Delhi, right? So putting a form on the Lord is limiting the form. Whereas if you say that the Lord is energy or consciousness or light, it can be everywhere, right? And the technical word is Brahman. So they say God is without a form and Lord is essentially Brahman. What about the Jiva, right? So when a portion of the Brahman separates and becomes illusioned, covered with Maya, it becomes the Jiva. So Maya in Sanskrit, so Ma means no, and Aya means it. So Maya essentially literally means not it, right? Which is a way of saying that what you see is not it, which means illusion. So there is the original form of the Lord, which is the all-pervading energy, consciousness, light. And at some point, parts of it get separated and covered with Maya. Those parts are called the Jiva, right? So this is the definition of who the Lord is and what the Jiva is. So what is the conclusion? That all the Jivas were earlier on God. If you trace the source of the Jivas as per the Mayavadis, at some point they were God, they were Brahman. And then some point of time, they separated, they were covered by Maya and they became Jiva. So essentially they are all God at some point of time. And what is liberation? That the Jiva loses his personal identity and merges back into the Brahman, becoming God. So the Jiva is a temporary state of God being illusioned. When that illusion is removed, then the temporary state is rectified and the Jiva resumes its God-like existence. It also means that the Jiva loses its identity, right? So when the small piece of energy merges back into the large piece of energy, then the existence of the small piece of energy as a separate identity is lost, right? So that particular Jiva disappears and becomes God. The problem with this is that it is not able to address many scriptural tattvas. Tattva means facts or truths. Like the fact in Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the soul is eternally distinct, right? If you say that the soul is eternally distinct, then how would you account for the fact that at some point it was not and at some point it will not be, right? And so there are many scriptural tattvas. This discussion, of course, goes several layers deep, but sufficient for us to acknowledge that it does not address many scriptural tattvas. The most important tattva that it does not exist is, how does Maya overpower God? Right? Because we have already established the fact, and the Mayavadis also established the fact, that God is most powerful. There's nothing more powerful than God, because if there was something more powerful than God, that would be God. So God is most powerful. But then at the same point, they're saying that Maya overpowers God, which means that implicitly you're accepting this notion that Maya is more powerful than God, which is why they're called Mayavadis. Right? Because even though they are not saying it, their philosophy says it, that while God is most powerful, God gets overpowered with Maya. So Prabhupada will call this out over and over again. And the reason he does that is that, so at least in India, more than 90, perhaps 95% of the people are Mayavadis. Right? So externally, they may seem to be not. I mean, they may be doing deity worship. I had this personal experience that this is in Vrindavan. And, the person was actually living in an ashram over there, more or less permanently, semi-permanently. Like part of the year he would live there. And every day morning, give obeisances to the deities, do arti. And then he was sitting and talking to me. And then he says, the ultimate goal of doing all this is to become God. So in their mind, all of this is a means to an end, right? So they will do deity worship until the point they're qualified to become deities themselves. They will worship the Lord until the point they become qualified to become the Lord, right? So externally, it may be difficult to distinguish, because the Mayavadis will be doing everything the same. But philosophically, their consciousness will be different. And the Mayavadi doctrine was made popular by Sripad Shankaracharya. Right? So he was prominent, I think, in 700 AD, I believe. And he literally, the entire length and breadth of India became Mayavadis. He was so powerful, incarnation of Lord Shiva, so powerful. And after that, the Vaishnava acharyas came, and they started establishing the Vaishnava Tattva. But surprisingly and unfortunately, most of the people, and this is not just, so now I'm establishing this, expanding the scope, not just in India, but most of the people anywhere have this notion of eventually becoming God. And the reason is because that is the notion that brought them down to the material world. Related question, what about the devas? Right? Again, going back to the beliefs in India. So, what about Lord Brahma? What about Lord Shiva, Durga Devi, Ganesh, Surya Dev, right? And in the Vedas, it is mentioned that there are 330 million devas. So what about them? So the scriptures say that these are positions that are occupied by empowered jivas. Right? So three things that we have to understand here. One, most important, they are jivas. So initially we made this point, there is Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva. Right? There's nothing in between. So these are all the devas are Jiva Tattvas. Second point is these are positions. So just like there is a president of the United States, it's a position. It's occupied by Joe Biden right now. Earlier on, it was occupied by Trump. Before that, by Obama. Different people. So one might say that for the last 200 years, there has been a president of the United States, which is an accurate statement. But one should also acknowledge the fact that in that time, hundreds of people have occupied that post. So similarly, all these demigods are positions. Indra, currently occupied by Purandar. After he dies, Bali Maharaj becomes Indra. After he dies, somebody else becomes Indra, and the scriptures give the names. The same thing for each and every demigod. Right? Brahma, occupied by a jiva. When his lifetime comes to an end, a different jiva comes and occupies. So, first point is demigods are jivas. Second point is demigods are positions that are occupied by jivas. Third point is they're empowered. That's what gives them these extraordinary powers. It's like the president creates a cabinet, and the cabinet creates further offices that are essentially executing the will of the president. So they're all empowered by the president. So similarly, all these devas, they're empowered by Krishna. So they are jivas who acquire special power because of the empowerment by Krishna. So Brahma has this ability to create the whole universe. It's godly. But in the Bhagavatam, we see that when Brahma was born, he had no abilities. He was praying to Lord Vishnu, and then Lord Vishnu, he empowered him with the creative impetus. Now, why did he get that powers and not us? Because he was qualified. So these are exalted jivas who have become qualified because of their execution of their prescribed duties. And it's said that if a jiva perfectly performs their karma for 100 lifetimes, so this is a statement made by Lord Shiva in the Bhagavatam, that if a jiva perfectly performs his duties for 100 lifetimes, he becomes qualified to occupy the position of Brahma. And same way for the other devas. So with this now we have a clear understanding of who the devas are. Moving on, let's talk about the three aspects of Krishna. So earlier on we said Krishna is a person and he's an individual. Now what we are saying that the same individual also expands and as Paramatma. Right? So with every Atma, Krishna expands as Paramatma. It does not dilute his singularity, does not dilute the fact that he's an individual. And the Vedas give different analogies, like the sun can reflect off, you have 1,000 water pots filled with water, and there's sun shining at the top. In each of the water pot, there is a sun. Right? But does not mean that there is 1,000 suns. There is still one sun. And these give us a sense. We can't extend the analogy too much. Obviously, the reflection of the sun does not carry the potency of the sun. But the Paramatma comes with all the potencies of Krishna. So the Paramatma is what is accompanying the Atma. So this is the second form of Krishna. The first is Krishna Swayam Bhagavan. The second is Krishna expanding to accompany the Atma, the Jivas, as Paramatma. Now the third is the effulgence of Krishna or the energy of Krishna, which is known as Brahman. Now we might say, then how is this different from what the Mayavadis say? That God is Brahman. The difference is that the Vaishnavas, they accept the existence of the Brahman as an aspect of the Lord. Right? They do not consider the Brahman to be independently existing. So just like the president, by his powers may be experienced everywhere. In the local offices, in the regional offices, they will say by the order of the president, by the order of the president. The president is not over there, but he's being his orders are being carried. So the impersonal Brahman is the effulgence or the energy of Krishna that is all pervading. And because these three aspects of Krishna are important to understand, the scriptures give, and Prabhupada give several analogies for us to understand. And I'm going to talk about a few of those analogies. So understanding the three aspects of Krishna. This is actually given by Prabhupada, this analogy. That so you're a person who's waiting on a railway platform, and in the far distant, you see the train coming. So when the train is at a distance, all you see is the light of the train, the smoke that's coming from the train. You don't see a form, you don't see any distinct outlines. All you see is light and smoke, right? And then as the train comes closer, then you see, oh, okay, the train has a form. The smoke is actually coming from the smokestack. The light is actually is a headlight of the train. And when the train actually pulls into the platform, then you see that actually the train is full of people. You know, there are individual forms in the train. So same entity, but depending on the qualifications of the perceiver, acquires different forms. A person might consider Krishna simply to be energy, the energy that is sustaining the universe, right? Another person may say that Krishna is the localized Brahman and the Paramatma, and yet another person will say that Krishna is Bhagavan. So it does not mean there are three different entities. It just means that there are three different perceptions of the same entity. It just means that the same entity is making itself available in three different ways, right? Another aspect, and this is probably the most popular way that Srila Prabhupada explains this, is the sun analogy. That one may experience the sun as sunshine, which is all pervading. That it's just there. All around you, there is lightness, there is some heat, and there is sunshine. A person who's a little bit more advanced will say that there is actually in the sky a sun globe. Right? So now it has a form, that it is a sun globe out in the sky. That is the cause of all this heat and light. And a person that is still more advanced will say that actually there is a sun god. There is a person on the sun planet who is the presiding deity of this, right? So now you see there is a form, there is the sun god, then there is the sun planet, and then there is the sunshine, right? So again, the sunshine is the Brahman, the sun planet is Paramatma, and the person, the sun, the deity of the sun is Bhagavan. Okay. Now, so I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, partially because I suspect that a lot of this you're familiar with, right? And this is serving as a reminder or just revision, and partly because this has been driven home in the introduction by Srila Prabhupada also, right? So last concept I want to talk about is creation. So the scriptures explain that the whole creation is divided into two parts: Tripad and Ekapad. 3/4 of the creation is the spiritual world. 1/4 of the creation is the material world. What is the relationship? That jivas from the spiritual world fall down to the material world, right? Why? When they develop this notion that I want to be God. Because in the spiritual world, everybody has the proper understanding that there is Krishna who is God, but then there is, for whatever reason, and the Vaishnava acharyas say that's something we don't meditate on too much. Why did the jiva fall? But we accept the fact that for whatever reason, there's a small number of jivas that begin to resent Krishna and say that I want to be Krishna. They come down to the material world. So one thing that is common in the material world is everyone wants to be God. That's why the Mayavadi doctrine is so popular, because it nourishes that notion of the jiva being God. Right? It's like there is a jail that is full of criminals, and somebody goes and tells them that actually stealing is a very good thing. No, so there will be many people attending his classes, and another person comes and says stealing is a bad thing. Not many people attending his classes, right? So the Mayavadis, they nourish that notion that yes, you're right, actually you are God. So many people gravitate towards that philosophical tenet. And the Vaishnavas say, no, you're not God, right? So difficult to realign the original cause of the fall of the jiva. But then there is the reverse also. Like if this reverse was not there, there would be no need for the scriptures to be there. There would be no need to follow spirituality. And the reverse is quite straightforward. That when you disambiguate the notion that you are God and accept the notion that Krishna is God, go back to the spiritual world. So where do we get all this information? The epistemology of ontology, right? It's just a fancy way of saying ontology is the science of transcendence, and epistemology is this understanding the source of knowledge, right? So the source of our knowledge is the scriptures. A lot of what we hear and accept is beyond empirical beliefs, right? We cannot empirically verify it. Like I'm telling you that Krishna is God, and somebody challenges me that prove to me Krishna is God, the only proof that I have is the scriptures. That because in Bhagavad Gita it is said, because in all the scriptures it is said, that is the proof. Right? But it is beyond empirical validation. And how do we make sure that this knowledge comes to us without any corruption? By the disciplic succession. Krishna is the original source of the knowledge. Because he is perfect, the knowledge is perfect. This we'll study in the 4th chapter. Because he is perfect, the knowledge is perfect. And the perfection of the knowledge is ensured by an unbroken disciplic succession. So whatever we get from our gurus, we transmit it as it is. That's why Prabhupada calls the Bhagavad Gita as it is, because he wants to emphasize that whatever he's speaking is what he has heard. And every member of the parampara subscribes to the same notion, which means that whatever I am hearing is what Krishna spoke. Right. So this is the epistemology of ontology. That where do we get knowledge from? Krishna. How does the knowledge come down to us? Through parampara. Right. So the Vedas are divided in 3 parts: the Shrutis, Smritis, and Nyayas. So the Shrutis are essentially the Chaturvedas, the Rig Ved, Samved, Yajurved, Atharved. The Smritis are the Puranas and Itihas, right? So Puranas are like the Bhagavad Puran, Devi Puran, Padma Puran. So there are Purans and Mahapurans, and so there are Puranas. Puranas essentially means pastimes of ancient personalities, and there is Itihas, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and then there is Nyaya. Nyaya is logic. Under Nyaya there is Vedanta Sutras, which essentially is Vedas explained in codes. Right? It's like you have a phenomena that you can describe in 3 ways. You can describe the phenomena succinctly, that when an apple falls from a tree, it will fall vertically downwards. You can explain it through a story, that there was once a person sitting under the tree and something hit him on his head and he looked up and he saw it was an apple falling. Right? Or you can express it as a sutra, that every body is attracted to another body with a force that is proportional to the product of the masses. So whatever that sutra is. Now, the reality is that the Vedas are lost. So Jiva Goswami does an analysis of what we have in the Vedas, and he concludes that 94% of the Vedas are lost. Only 6% of the Vedas are existing. So it essentially makes Vedas as a source of knowledge useless. Right? If I'm giving you directions to go from point A to point B, and I say you go down and you take a right, and the next 4 instructions are lost, and then I say now you go straight and take a left, and then again the next 10 instructions are lost, and then I say okay, now from the roundabout you take the 3rd corner. There's no way that you can navigate using these instructions, right? So Jiva Goswami says the Vedas are 94% lost, so no practical use. Now it doesn't impinge on the authority of the Vedas. It impinges on our ability to follow them. The Vedanta Sutras are too complicated. They're there, but too complicated to understand, right? So then where do we get our knowledge from? The Puranas and Itihas. And the beauty of the Puranas and Itihas is that even if they get a little bit here and there, so like I say that the apple falls on the head of Mr. Newton, and then somebody else says the apple falls on the head of Mr. Einstein. So the details can change, but the underlying fact does not change. That's the beauty of the Puranas. That even though over time some things may have changed here and there, but because they're given as stories, because they're given, and they're not fictitious stories, but they're factual stories, but they're essentially given as factual stories. Even if the order of the verses have gone a little bit here and there, the Sanskrit has changed, it does not make a difference. And Mahabharata is one of the itihas that is more or less preserved. And within Mahabharata appears the famous Bhagavad Gita, right? So the point that I'm leading to is, this is what makes the Bhagavad Gita special. That the Bhagavad Gita embodies within it the essence of the Vedas. And by understanding the Bhagavad Gita, we are in the fortunate position of understanding the Vedas. So that is why Bhagavad Gita is also known as Gita Upanishad, right? Because it is Upanishadic by nature, which will finally lead us to the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. Okay, so let me end over here, and I will stop now for questions and answers. Okay, so we have 9 minutes. I spoke a little longer. Then it's an occupational hazard, so my apologies for it. But in 9 minutes, we'll try and cover the Q&A. Yes, Rupa Raghunath Prabhu, please go ahead and.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for the wonderful nectar. I see Shri Padma Manjari Mataji has raised her hand. Go ahead, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Bhayahari Prabhu, all devotees, besides my humble obeisances, thank you so much for the class. My question is, in your lecture, Bhayahari Prabhu, you said that Dharma is the intrinsic quality of the jiva. So then, how does that is our intrinsic quality to serve everyone? And how does that relate to varnashram? Because everyone have their own occupational duties, you know. So I just want to know if it's different or is the same, or all of our quality is to serve. And while you were doing this class, I was thinking, you know, Bhayahari concept, you know, you read, and if you don't have anyone to explain it, you don't really understand what it is. And I'm thinking, but Mayavadi, they still believe in God. What's the difference between Mayavadi and atheists? At least they still believe in God. But then when two wrongs cannot make one right, because it's not that they believe in God, they just destroy the whole concept of God. It's rather you be ignorant and you can be enlightened than, you know, you just deny God. So my main question is about Dharma or intrinsic quality and how it ties into Varnashram. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you for the question. So I'm going to so you said that that dharma is the intrinsic quality of the jiva. I'm going to change that a little bit. Dharma is not the intrinsic quality of the jiva. That which is the intrinsic quality of the jiva is called dharma. Right. So slight difference between two. And use the example of liquidity and water and fire and the light and heat of fire. They are the intrinsic qualities of those entities, and that's why they're called jiva. Similarly, that which is the intrinsic quality of the jiva is called its dharma. And the reason there is stress on intrinsic is that it does not change. Right? It will not. So if water becomes not liquid, it's not water anymore. It's ice or it is steam. Right? As long as water is water, the intrinsic quality does not change. And as per the scriptures, the intrinsic quality of the jiva is to serve. Jivere sarupoy Krishna Nitya Das. Right. So that is the dharma of the jiva. Now, in the Bhagavatam, it is explained that there is two kinds of dharmas. There is the paradharma and the swadharma. So the paradharma is the intrinsic quality of a liberated soul. The swadharma is the quality of a conditioned soul. So the varnashram comes under swadharma. That when a soul becomes conditioned and because of the conditioning, it acquires a certain guna, certain set of qualities, certain prakriti, then it acquires what is known as swadharma. I am a kshatriya, I am a brahman, vaishya, shudra. Right? And the whole purpose of the scriptures, Bhagavad Gita, etc., is to understand the distinction between these two. So the scriptures don't negate saying that don't follow your swadharma, but to understand the distinction between the two and use the swadharma to be reinstated in your paradharma. So to be a kshatriya, and that's the underlying message of Bhagavad Gita, be a kshatriya, and in being a kshatriya, re-establish your position as being a devotee of Krishna. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Padmini Radha Mataji, go ahead, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for this lovely class. It was very wonderful. I just had one question about the slide when you were talking about Mayavadi philosophy, Prabhu. So I was just thinking, how do we understand the fact that when we appear in this material world, separate from the spirit, so we all are coming from the spiritual world, right? We appear here because we have had desires. So I guess I was trying to, my question was, are we illusioned by Maya? And if so, is that why we fall down? But then where it's difficult to understand is, how can we be illusioned by Maya in spiritual world? So I guess, can you clarify my understanding as to what is the exact reason why we fall down?
Okay. So one of the things that I spoke about when I was talking about the fall down is that the acharyas say don't think too much about it. Right? So Bhakti Siddhanta gives this example that your house is on fire. What should be your focus? Getting out of the house. Not that, who lit the match and where did the fire start from, and is it a small or a big fire? So many of these questions, Prabhupada was also asked. Prabhupada would say very charmingly, when you go back to the spiritual world, you will get your answer. So if you're very anxious to get an answer to that question, then you practice your bhakti perfectly and go back to the spiritual world. That'll be my answer to you also.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Sharmi
Okay.
Mataji is next.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. My humble obeisances. It was a beautiful class. So I had one question about Vishnu Tattva. So the understanding is, I come from the Madhvacharya Sampradaya, and the understanding is that all forms of Vishnu, Krishna, Rama, Narasimhadev, all of them are equally potent and are the same. Is that the understanding that, here as well? Like, in the sense, I just wanted to understand it more deeply a bit.
Oh, you're right. I think you're I guess resonating with the point that's made. Vishnu Tattva is Vishnu Tattva, right? Their forms. They may manifest their powers differently, right? But Vishnu Tattva is Vishnu Tattva. Right?
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Okay, so we will take only, I just want to be sensitive about time. We'll take one more question, and then after that, if there's any more questions, please feel free to put it in the WhatsApp group, and I'll make sure they're answered. But we'll stop at one more question after this.
Okay, Shardi Mataji, go next. Sushma Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji, I had a question about the Mayavadi philosophy that you said that, they believe that after Ajiva becomes liberated, they get, means liberation means getting merged into the existence of God. And that is what most of us, at least I grew up with the conception, like everywhere in the movies or even in the books, that you get mukti after you die and you become one with God. Is this philosophy also present in our Vaishnav scriptures, Prabhuji? Because after coming to ISKCON, I learned that no, and as you said also in your class, that Jiva Tattva and Vishnu Tattva are always separate, they are never mixed together. So how did this philosophy come in place, Prabhuji? That was my question.
Okay, so I guess you asked two questions. That is this present in Vaishnav theology? The answer is no. It is present in the sense that it is present as a mode to refute it. Like Prabhupada talks about it very often in his purports, in his lectures. But in order to refute it, for the very reason that you said, that the majority of people subscribe to this notion, so he disambiguates it. But the philosophy per se is not present. Why did it come? It is it's a whole lecture in itself. So we know Sripad Shankaracharya he was not the first one, but he was the one who made it popular. But sufficient to say that Krishna extends himself to everybody, right? So to those who want to approach him sincerely, he appears in his original tattvas. And to those who want to be cheated, he appears in this cheating form. Prabhupada makes this point that for every one person who wants to be cheated, there is one person sitting to cheat him. Right? So same thing from Krishna, that there are people who want to become God. Right? And Krishna says, okay, here's a philosophy that you can follow to become God. And ultimately, he's the source of everybody, right? Sripad Shankaracharya drew his inspiration from Krishna only. But this is the ye yathamam prapadyante, right? The mood of Krishna. As one approaches me in a particular mood, I reciprocate in that mood. If one approaches me in a mood of genuineness, I manifest myself. If one approaches me in a mood of being crooked, I reciprocate by being even more crooked than them. Okay, thank you. So we'll end over here. And like I said, if there are any more questions, please feel free to put them in the WhatsApp group. And next week we will do the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnavind ki
Ki Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare
Bhayahari
Krishna.
Prabhuji ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna,
Thank you
Prabhuji.
so much,
Connect
Prabhu. Very
Prabhu.
nice class.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Rupa Raghunath, are you still there? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, let me stop the recording, Prabhuji, and then I will speak.
I just wanted to mention to Mother Shushma, there's an article in Back to Godhead from 1980 called Spiritual Strategies for the Age of Iron, and it's a description of the way in which a variety of philosophies eventually coalesce into the presentation of Bhakti through the Vedic literature. So I put a link in the chat. It's an ISKCON publication from Back to Godhead in 1980, but it's one of the best expositions on that progress and that process if she's interested. I don't know if she got it before she signed off, but perhaps I can't cut and paste from the chat. Maybe someone could send it to her. Just, you know, some light
Sure.
additional reading.
I have it copied. We'll send it on the.
Okay.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Can you see my name?
Yes,
On the...
S Majmudar.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I wasn't sure if my name showed up or not. So.
It's good. It's good. Thank you, Mataji.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. It was
Hare
a nice class.